What is this about big? You know, seeing the big picture, having the big idea, clinching the big deal. Nobody wants to clinch the little deal. Who wants to do that? You'd be a little deal clincher, a small shot. You know, when you go and get a burger, you want a Big Mac. You go to the fun fair, you ride Big Dipper. You turn on TV and you see Big Bird, or you're afraid of the big bad wolf.
Barclays is a British multinational universal bank. The company was founded on November 17, 1690 in the city of London in the Kingdom of England, and to this very day the company is still alive and healthy. So, how did it become so popular? Let's find out. 1690 to 1900. Barclays traces its origins back to November 17, 1690, when John Freem, a Quaker, and Thomas Gould started trading as goldsmith bankers in Lombard Street, London. The name Barclays became associated with the business in 1736, when Freem's son-in-law, James Barclay, became a partner. In 1728, the bank moved to 54 Lombard Street, identified by the sign of the black spread eagle, which in subsequent years would become a core part of the bank's visual identity. The Barclay family were connected with slavery, both as proponents and opponents. David and Alexander Barclay were engaged in the slave trade in 1756. David Barclay of Youngsbury, on the other hand, was a noted ableist, and Vernie Shepherd, the Jamaican historian of Dysphoria, singles out the case of how he chose to free his slaves in that colony. In 1776, the firm was styled Barclay, Bevan, and Benning, and remained so until 1785, when another partner, John Tritton, who had married a Barclay, was admitted, and the business then became Barclay, Bevan, Benning, and Tritton. In 1896, 12 houses in London and the English provinces, notably Goslings and Sharpay, Backhouses Bank of Darlington and Goonies Bank of Norwich, the latter two of which also had their roots in Quaker families, united to form Barclays and Company, a joint stock bank, which at its formation held around 1/4 of deposits in English private banks. 1900 to 1945. Between 1905 and 1916, Barclays extended its brand network by making acquisitions of small English banks. Further expansion followed in 1918 when Barclays amalgamated with the London Provincial and South Western Bank, and in 1919 when the British Linen Bank was acquired by Barclays, although the British Linen Bank retained a separate board of directors and continued to issue its own banknotes. In 1925, the Colonial Bank, National Bank of South Africa, and the Anglo-Egyptian Bank were amalgamated, and Barclays operated its overseas operations under the name Barclays Bank, Dominion, Colonial, and Overseas, Barclays DCO. In 1938, Barclays acquired the first Indian exchange bank, the Central Exchange Bank of India, which had opened in London in 1936 with the sponsorship of Central Bank of India. In 1941, during the German occupation of France, a branch of Barclays in Paris, headed by Marcel Chitterman, worked directly with the invading force. Senior officials at the bank volunteered the names of Jewish employees, as well as ceding an estimated 100 Jewish bank accounts to the German occupiers. The Paris branch used its funds to increase the operational power of a large quarry that helped produce steel for the Germans. There is no evidence of contact between the head office in London and the branch in Paris during the occupation. Marcel Cheriton was kept as the branch manager until he retired in the 60s. 1946 to 1980. In May 1958, Barclays was the first UK bank to appoint a female bank manager. Hilda Harding managed Barclays' Hanover Square branch in London until her retirement in 1970. In 1965, Barclays established a U.S. affiliate, Barclays Bank of California in San Francisco. Barclays launched the first credit card in the UK, Barclay Card, in 1966. On June 27, 1967, Barclays deployed the world's first cash machine in Enfield. The British actor Reg Varney was the first person to use the machine. In 1969, a planned merger with Martins Bank and Lloyds Bank was blocked by the Monopolies and Mergers Commission, but the acquisition of Martins Bank on its own was later permitted. Also that year, the British Linen Bank subsidiary was sold to the Bank of Scotland in exchange for a 25% stake, a transaction that became effective from 1971. Barclays DCO changed its name to Barclays Bank International in 1971. From 1972 until 1980, a minority stake in Banca Barclays Castellini S.p.A. Milan was owned by the Castellini family. In 1980, Barclays Bank International acquired the remaining stake in Barclays Castellini from the Castellini family. In August 1975, following the secondary banking crash, Barclays acquired Mercantile Credit Company. 1980 to 2000. Barclays Bank International expanded its business in 1980 to include commercial credit and took over American Credit Corporation, renaming it Barclays American Corporation. During 1985, Barclays Bank and Barclays Bank International merged, and as part of the corporate reorganization, the former Barclays Bank plc became a group holding company renamed Barclays Group plc, and UK retail banking was integrated under the former BBI and renamed Barclays Bank plc from Barclays Bank Limited. In response to the Big Bang on the London Stock Exchange, in 1986 Barclays bought UK stockbroker Des Zoteke and Bevan and jobbing firm Wed Derlicker, formerly Wed Jefferson. They were merged with Barclays Merchant Bank to form Barclays Des Zoete Wed, BZW. Also that year, Barclays sold its South African business operating under the Barclays National Bank name after protests against Barclays' involvement in South Africa and its apartheid government. Barclays introduced the Connect card in June 1987, the first debit card in the United Kingdom. In 1988, Barclays sold Barclays Bank of California, which at the time was the 17th largest bank in California measured by assets, to Wells Fargo for $125 million in cash. Edgar Pierce, the Mardi Gras bomber, began a terror campaign against the bank and the supermarket chain Sainsbury's in 1994. Barclays bought Wells Fargo Nico Investment Advisors WFNIA in 1996 and merged it with BZW Investment Management to form Barclays Global Investors. Bob Diamond took charge of the investment banking businesses that year. 2 years later, in 1998, the BZW business was broken up and the equity and corporate finance divisions were sold to Credit Suisse First Boston. Barclays retained the debit-focused fixed income business and structured capital markets, which formed the foundation of the rebranded Barclays Capital (BarCap). Barclays Capital had offices in over 29 countries and employed over 20,000 people, with over 7,000 people working in its IT division. In 1998, Barclays Bank agreed to pay $3.6 million to Jews whose assets were seized from French branches of the British-based bank during World War II. Barclays, along with 7 French banks, was named in a lawsuit filed in New York on behalf of Jews who were unable to reclaim money they deposited during the Nazi era. In an unusual move as part of the trend at the time for free ISPs, Barclay launched an internet service in 1999 called Barclays.net. This entity was acquired by British Telecom in 2001. In the 1990s, Barclays helped to fund President Robert Mugabe's government in Zimbabwe. The most controversial of a set of loans provided by Barclays was the £30 million it gave to help sustain land reforms that saw Mugabe seize white-owned farmland and drive more than 100,000 black workers from their homes. Opponents have called the bank's involvement a disgrace and an insult to the millions who have suffered human rights abuses. A Barclays spokesman said the bank has had customers in Zimbabwe for decades, and abandoning them now would make matters worse. We are committed to continuing to provide a service to those customers in what is clearly a difficult operating environment. Barclays also provided two mugates associated with bank accounts ignoring European Union sanctions on Zimbabwe. The men are Elliot Minikia and Minister of Public Service Nicholas Gochi. Barclays has defended its position by insisting that the EU rules do not apply to its 67% owned Zimbabwean subsidiary because it was incorporated outside the EU. In August 2000, Barclays took over the recently mutualized Woolwich plc, formerly the Woolwich Building Society, in a £5.4 billion acquisition. Woolwich thus joined the Barclays group of companies, and the Woolwich name was retained after the acquisition. The company's head office remained in Bexleyheath, southeast London, 4 miles, 6 kilometers from the original head office in Woolwich. Barclays closed 171 branches in the UK in 2001, many of them in rural communities. Barclays called itself the Big Bank, but this name was quickly given a low profile after a series of embarrassing PR stunts. On October 31st, 2001, Barclays and CIBC agreed to combine their Caribbean operations to establish a joint venture company known as the First Caribbean International Bank, FCIB. In April 2002, Barclays enacted a 4-to-1 share split. In 2003, Barclays bought the American credit card company Juniper Bank from CIBC, rebranding it as Barclays Bank Delaware. The same year saw the acquisition of Banco Zaragozano, the 11th largest Spanish bank. Barclays took over sponsorship of the Premier League from Barclay Card in 2004. In May 2005, Barclays moved its group headquarters from Lombard Street in the City of London to 1 Churchill Place in Canary Wharf. Also in 2005, Barclays sealed a £2.6 billion takeover of ABSA Group Limited, South Africa's largest retail bank, acquiring a 54% stake on July 27, 2005. Then in 2006, Barclays purchased the Home X Servicing Corporation for $469 million in cash from Wochovo Corporation. That year also saw the acquisition of the financial website Compare the Loan, and Barclays announcing plans to rebrand Woolwich branches as Barclays, migrating Woolwich customers onto Barclays accounts and migrating back-office processes onto Barclays systems. The Woolwich brand was to be used for Barclays mortgages. Barclays also exited retail banking operations in the Caribbean region, which extended as far as back as 1837 through selling of its joint venture stake in First Caribbean International Bank FCIB to CIBC between $989 million and $1.8 billion. Abandoned merger with ABN AMRO. In March 2007, Barclays announced plans to merge with ABN AMRO, the largest bank in the Netherlands. However, on October 5, 2007, Barclays announced that it had abandoned its bid, citing inadequate support by ABN shareholders. Fewer than 80% of shares had been tendered to Barclays' cash and shares offer. This left the consortium led by Royal Bank of Scotland free to proceed with its counterbid for ABN AMRO. To help finance its bid for ABN AMRO, Barclays sold a 3.1% stake to China Development Bank and a 3% stake to Tamasaka Holdings, the investment arm of the Singaporean government. Also in 2007, Barclays agreed to purchase Equifirst Corporation from Regions Financial Corporation for $225 million. That year also saw Barclays Personal Investment Management announcing the closure of their operation in Peterborough and its resitting to Glasgow, laying off nearly 900 members of staff. Financing. On August 30th, 2007, Barclays was forced to borrow £1.6 billion, which is $3.2 billion from the Bank of England Sterling Standby Facility. This is made available as a last resort when banks are unable to settle their debt to other banks at the end of daily trading. Despite rumors about liquidity liquidity at Barclays, the loan was necessary due to a technical problem with the computerized settlement network. A Barclays spokesman was quoted as saying there are no liquidity issues in the UK markets. Barclays itself is flush with liquidity. On November 9, 2007, Barclays shares dropped 9% and were evenly temporarily suspended for a short period of time due to rumors of a £4.8 billion, which is $10 billion US, exposure to bad debts in the US. However, a Barclays spokesman denied the rumors. In February 2008, Barclays bought the credit card brand Goldfish for $70 million US, gaining 1.7 million customers and $3.9 billion US in receivables. Barclays also bought a controlling stake in the Russian retail bank Expo Bank for $745 million US. Later in the year, Barclays commenced its Pakistan operations with initial funding of $100 million US. Barclays sought to raise capital privately, avoiding direct equity investment from the UK government, which was offered to boost its capital ratio. Barclays believed that maintaining its independence from government was within the best interests of its shareholders. In July 2008, Barclays attempted to raise £4.5 billion through a non-traditional rights issue to shore up its weakened Tier 1 capital ratio, which involved a rights offer to existing shareholders and the sale of a stake to Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation. Only 19% of shareholders took up their rights, leaving investors China Development Bank and Qatar Investment Authority with increased holdings in the bank. Reuters reported in October 2008 that the British government would inject £40 billion, which is $69 billion US, into three banks including Barclays, which might seek over £7 billion. Barclays later confirmed that it rejected the government's offer and would instead raise £6.5 billion of new capital, £2 billion by cancellation of dividend by and £4.5 billion from private investors. Barclays launched a further round of capital raising approved by special resolution on November 24, 2008 as part of its overall plan to achieve higher capital targets set by the UK's Financial Services Authority to ensure it would remain independent. Barclays raised £7 billion from investors from Abu Dhabi and Qatar. Existing Barclays shareholders complained they were not offered full preemption rights in this round of capital raising, even threatening to revolt at the extraordinary meeting. Sheikh Mansour and Qatar Holding agreed to open up £500 million of their new holdings of reserve capital instruments for clawback. Existing investors now took this up. Lehman Brothers acquisition. Bob Diamond led the effort to purchase the North American business Lehman Brothers after its bankruptcy in September 2008, securing Barclays a presence in U.S. equities and investment banking. On September 16, 2008, Barclays announced its agreement to purchase, subject to regulatory approval, the investment banking and trading divisions of Lehman Brothers, including its New York skyscraper, which was a United States financial conglomerate that had filed for bankruptcy. On September 20, 2008, a revised version of the deal, a $1.35 billion US, which is £700 million, planned for Barclays to acquire the core business of Lehman Brothers, mainly Lehman's $960 million US Midtown Manhattan office skyscraper, which, with responsibility for 9,000 former employees, was approved. After a 7-hour hearing, New York Bankruptcy Court Judge James Peck ruled, "I have to approve this transaction because it is the only available transaction. Lehman Brothers became a victim, in effect the only true icon to fall in a tsunami that has befallen the credit markets. This is the most momentous bankruptcy hearing I have ever sat through. It can never be deemed precedent for future cases. It's hard for me to imagine a similar emergency." Luc Despens, the creditors committee counsel, said, The reason we're not objecting is really based on the lack of viable alternative. We did not support the transaction because there had not been enough time to properly review it. In the amended agreement, Barclays would absorb $47.4 billion in securities and assume $45.5 billion in trading liabilities. Lehman's attorney, Harvey R. Miller of Wheel, Gottschall and Manges, said the purchase price for the real estate components of the deal would be $1.29 billion, including $960 million for Lehman's New York headquarters and $330 million for two New York Jersey data centers. Jersey data centers. Lehman's original estimate value its headquarters at $1.2 billion, but its appraisal from CB Richard Ellis this week valued it at $900 million. Further, Barclays will not acquire Lehman's Eagle Energy unit, but will have entities known as Lehman Brothers in Canada Incorporated, Lehman Brothers South America, Lehman Brothers Uruguay, and its private investment management business for high net worth individuals. Finally, Lehman will retain $20 billion of securities assets in Lehman Brothers Incorporated that are not being transferred to Barclays. Barclays had a potential liability of $2.5 billion to be paid as severance if it chooses not to retain some of Lehman employees beyond the guaranteed 90 days. In September 2014, Barclays was ordered to pay $15 million in settlement charges that alleged the bank had failed to maintain an adequate internal compliance system after its acquisition of Lehman Brothers during the 2008 financial crisis. Qatar capital raising. In January 2009, the press reported that further capital may be required and that while the government might be willing to fund this, it may be unable to do so because the previous capital investment of the Qatari state was subject to a proviso that no third party might put in further money without Qataris receiving compensation at the value the shares had commanded in October 2008. In March 2009, it was reported that in 2008, Barclays received billions of dollars from its insurance arrangements with AIG, including $8.5 billion from funds provided by the United States to bail out AIG. Barclays' share price fell 54% in June 2009 after the International Petroleum Investment Company IPIC, which had invested up to £400.75 billion in November 2008, sold 1.3 billion Barclays shares. Qatar Holdings sold a 3.5% stake worth of £10 billion in October 2009, and a further sale of warrants worth around £750 million in November 2012, but remains one of the bank's largest shareholders. In July 2012, Barclays revealed that the FSA was investigating whether the bank inadequately disclosed fees paid to Qatar Investment Authority. In August 2012, the Serious Fraud Office announced an investigation to the Middle East capital raising. The Financial Services Authority announced an expansion of the investigation into Barclays' Qatar deal in January 2013, focusing on the disclosure surrounding the ownership of the securities in the bank. Barclays' June and November 2008 capital raisings are the subject of investigations. The UK Serious Fraud Office commenced its investigation in August 2012. In October 2012, the United States Department of Justice and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission informed Barclays that they had commenced an investigation into whether the group's relationships with third parties who assist Barclays to win or retain business are compliant with the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Barclays had sought to raise capital privately, avoiding direct equity investment from the government of the United Kingdom, and therefore a bailout. The result of Abu Dhabi's £3.5 billion investment in the bank, a deal which Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan made a profit of £3.5 billion. Much of the focus to date has been on the injections by Qatar in June and November 2008, notably the so far unproven the so far unproven allegation that Barclays lent Qatar the money to invest in the bank. Other questions include what happened to the £110 million in fees paid by Barclays ostensibly to Sheikh Mansour, and the £66 million provided by Barclays to the courtiers for unexplained advisory fees. In June 2017, following a 5-year investigation by the UK Serious Fraud Office covering Barclays' activities during the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008, former CEO John Varley and 3 former colleagues, Roger Jenkins, Thomas Carleys, and Richard Both, were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and the provision of unlawful financial assistance in connection with capital raising. The executives were cleared in February 2020. In February 2018, the Serious Fraud Office charged Barclays with unlawful financial assistance related to billions of pounds raised from the Qatar deal. On June 8, 2020, Barclays was also accused of deceit by a British businesswoman, Amanda Staveley's firm PCP Capital. The company sued the bank in a £1.5 billion lawsuit claiming that it had deliberately misled the market over the terms of its capital raising deal with Qatar. PCP alleged that Qatar Holdings was offered a completely different deal than that offered to Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan of Abu Dhabi, who, accordingly to Amanda Staveley, was introduced to Barclays by PCP. However, during the hearing, the High Court of London, the Barclays lawyer, Geoffrey Onions, accused Staveley of significantly exaggerating her business relationship with the Abu Dhabi Sheikh and curating a hustle by getting involved in a crucial capital raising. Staveley and PCP Capital subsequently reduced the amount of their claim but lost the case in the High Court. Accusations of money laundering. In March 2009, Barclays was accused of violating international anti-money laundering laws. According to the NGO Global Witness, the Paris branch of Barclays held the account of Equatorial Guinean President Teodoro Obiang's son, Teodoro Obiang, even after evidence that Obiang had siphoned oil revenues from government funds emerged in 2004. According to a Global Witness, Obiang purchased a Ferrari and maintains a mansion in Malibu with the funds from this account. A 2010 report by the Wall Street Journal described how Credit Suisse, Barclays, Lloyds Banking Group, and other banks were involved in helping the Alvi Foundation, Bank Melli, the Iranian government, and or others circumventive U.S. laws banning financial transactions with certain states. They did this by stripping information out of wire transfers, thereby concealing the source of funds. Barclays settled with the government for $298 million US. Tax avoidance. In March 2009, Barclays obtained an injunction against The Guardian requiring it to remove from its website confidential leaked documents describing how SCM, Barclays Structured Capital Markets Division, planned to use £11 billion of loans to curate hundreds of millions of pounds of tax benefits via an elaborate circuit of Cayman Islands companies, U.S. partnership, and Luxembourg subsidiaries. In an editorial on the issue, The Guardian pointed out that due to the mismatch of resources, tax collectors, HMRC, now have to rely on websites such as WikiLeaks to obtain such documents. And indeed, the documents in question have now appeared on WikiLeaks. Separately, another Barclays whistleblower revealed several days later that the SEM transactions had produced between £900 million and £1 billion in tax avoidance in 1 year, adding that the deals start with tax, then commercial purpose is added to them. In February 2012, Barclays was ordered by the Treasury to pay £500 million in tax, which it had tried to avoid. Barclays was accused by HMRC of designing two schemes that were intended to avoid substantial amounts of tax. Tax rules had required the bank to tell the UK authorities about its plans. David Gauck, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, said that we do not take today's actions lightly, but the potential tax loss from this scheme and the history of previous abuse in the area mean that this is a circumstance where the decision to change the law with full retrospective effect is justified. Rate fixing scandal. In June 2012, as a result of an international investigation, Barclays Bank was fined a total of £290 million, which is $450 million US, for manipulating the daily settings of London interbank offered rate, LIBOR, and the Euro interbank offered rate, Euribor. The United States Department of Justice and Barclays officially agreed that the manipulation of the submissions affected the fixed rates on some occasions. The bank was found to have made inappropriate submissions of rates which formed part of the LIBOR and Euribor setting processes, sometimes to make a profit and other times to make the bank look more secure during the financial crisis. This happened between 2005 and 2009 as often as daily. The BBC said revelations concerning the fraud were greeted with almost universal astonishment in the banking industry. The UK's Financial Services Authority, FSA, which levied a fine of £59.5 million, which is $92.7 million, gave Barclays the biggest fine it had ever imposed in its history. The FSA's Director of Enforcement described Barclays' behavior as completely unacceptable, adding LIBOR is an incredibly important benchmark reference rate, and it is relied on for many hundreds of thousands of contacts all over the world. The bank's chief executive, Bob Diamond, decided to give up his bonus as a result of the fine. The Liberal Democrat politician Lord Oakeshott criticized Diamond, saying if he had any shame, he would go. If the Barclays board has any backbone, they'll sack him. The U.S. Department of Justice has also been involved, with other financial institutions and individuals under investigation. On July 2nd, 2012, Marcus Aegis resigned from the chairman position following the interest rate rigging scandal. On July 3rd, 2012, Bob Diamond resigned with immediate effect, leaving Marcus Aegis to fill his post until a replacement is found. Within the space of a few hours, this was followed by the resignation of bank's chief operating officer, Jerry Dill Miser. Barclays subsequently announced that Anthony Jenkins, its existing chief executive of global retail and business banking, would become group chief executive on August 3rd, 2012. On February 17, 2014, the Serious Fraud Office charged 3 former bank employees with manipulating LIBOR rates between June 2005 and August 2007. 4 employees were jailed in July 2016 for up to 6.5 years, with 2 others cleared after a retrial. U.S. electricity market manipulation. In July 2013, U.S. energy regulator, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, ordered Barclays to pay £299 million fine penalty for attempting to manipulate the electricity market in the U.S. The fine by FERC relates to allegations in December 2008. Gold price manipulation. In May 2014, the Financial Conduct Authority fined the bank £26 million over systems and controls failures and conflict of interest in relation to the bank and its customers in connection to the gold fixing during the period 2004 to 2013 and for manipulation of the gold price on June 8, 2012. U.S. lawsuit alleging dark pool fraud. In June 2014, the U.S. state of New York filed a lawsuit against the bank alleging it defrauded and deceived investors with inaccurate marketing material about its unregulated trading system known as a dark pool. Specifically, the firm was accused of hiding the fact that TradeBot participated in the dark pool when they were in fact one of the largest players. The state in its complaint said it was being assisted by former Barclays executives and it was seeking unspecified damages. The bank's shares dropped 5% on news of the lawsuit, prompting an announcement to the London Stock Exchange by the bank saying it was taking the allegations seriously and was cooperating with the New York Attorney General. A month later, the bank filed a motion for the suit to be dismissed, saying there had been no fraud, no victims, and no harm to anyone. The New York Attorney General's office issued a statement saying the Attorney General was confident the motion would fail. On January 31st, 2016, Barclays settled with both the New York Attorney General's office and the SEC, agreeing to pay $70 million split evenly between the SEC and New York State, admitting it violated securities and laws and agreeing to install an independent monitor for the dark pool. Climate change. In 2017, Barclays faced protests by environmentalists because of its ownership of Third Energy, which planned to extract natural gas using hydraulic fracking at Kirby Misbeton in Yorkshire. Barclays later sold Third Energy in 2020 to Alpha Energy. Between 2016 and 2021, Barclays, along with HSBC, Santander, NatWest, and Lloyds, funneled $368 billion into the fossil fuel industry. The Big Five UK high street banks provided $15.7 billion in finance to the top 50 oil and gas expanders in 2021. In 2020, the campaign group Share Action filed a resolution at Barclays AGM because of its role as Europe's largest funder of fossil fuel companies. Barclays invested $85 billion in fossil fuel extraction and $24 billion in expansion. Exchange rate rigging last look system. Barclays agreed to pay $150 million to resolve an investigation by New York's banking regulator into a trading practice that allowed the bank to exploit a milliseconds long lag between an order and its execution that sometimes hurt its clients. The latest fallout from the bank's foreign exchange business. In certain instances, Barclays used this last look system to automatically reject client orders that would be unprofitable for the bank because of subsequent price swings during milliseconds long latency hold periods. Furthermore, when clients questioned Barclays about these rejected trades, Barclays failed to disclose the reason that the trades were being rejected, instead citing technical issues or providing vague responses. Unsuitable mutual fund transactions. According to the Financial Industry Regulator Authority, Barclays' inadequate supervisory procedures failed to stop many customers from swapping one mutual fund for another when the benefits of switching might be undermined by the transaction costs, resulting in $8.63 million of losses for their customers between January 2010 and June 2015. Additionally, from March to August 2014, Barclays processed 1,723 fund transactions that were inconsistent with its customers' goals, risk, tolerance, or other investments, which caused an additional $818,000 of customer harm. As a result, Barclays was required to pay $10 million in restitution, including interest, to affected customers that was fined $3.75 million but did not admit or deny wrongdoing. Disposals. On June 12, 2009, Barclays sold its Global Investors Unit, which included its exchange-traded fund business, iShares, to BlackRock for $13.5 billion US. Standard Life sold Standard Life Bank to Barclays in October 2009. This sale was completed on January 1st, 2010. Barclays sold its retailing banking unit in Spain to CaixaBank in 2014. With the sale, CaixaBank acquired around 550,000 new retail and private banking clients and 2,400 employees. Barclays announced in June 2015 that it would sell its U.S. wealth and investment management business to Stifel for an undisclosed fee. The bank announced in May 2017 that it would sell £1.5 billion worth of shares of its Barclay Africa Group subsidiary as part of its strategy to refocus its business from Africa to the UK and US. In September 2017, Barclays sold off the last part of its retail banking segment on continental Europe, and after selling its French retail, wealth, and investment management operations to AnaCap. Recent history. In October 2012, Barclays announced it had agreed to buy the ING Direct UK business of the ING Group. The transfer of the business to Barclays was approved at the High Court on February 20th, 2013, and the ING Direct was renamed Barclays Direct and would be integrated into the existing Barclays business within 2 years. To ward off the effects of Brexit, Barclays borrowed £6 billion from the Bank of England between April and June 2017 as part of a post-referendum stimulus package launched in August 2016. In August 2021, Barclays announced a $400 million capital infusion to its business in India, which was the single largest capital infusion into its India business in 3 decades. On October 31st, 2021, in a surprise move, Group CEO Jess Stanley agreed to step down amid investigation of his ties to the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. He was replaced as Group CEO by the Indian-born American banker C.S. Venkatapesaragan, who had become the first person of Indian origin to lead Barclays. On March 1st, 2023, Barclays acquired specialist mortgage lender Kensington Mortgages, based in Maidenhead, has approximately 600 employees and originated £1.9 billion of mortgages during the year ended March 31st, 2022. And there's the history of Barclays. How did it become so popular? Well, I think with all those acquisitions that they did with banks from all over the world, I think that's how they became very popular, and even getting some of those customers that were part of those banks onto their banks. Anyways, I think this is where I'm going to end off this video. If you guys happen to enjoy this video, please make sure to like button, and also don't forget to subscribe because I do videos every single day. And also don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell on my second channel. You can find my second channel down in below, and you can also, and if you guys like to also check out my social media pages along with my Instagram where you can send me fan art, you guys can check down in below for my social media and my Instagram where you can once again send me fan art. And until then, I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye!